Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to the webinar on penetration testing. Thank you all for coming along. My name is Michel, and I'm a web security consultant here at SSL 247. I'm here today with James, our pen test specialist. Before starting, just a few words regarding SSL 247. SSL 247 is a web security company with over 12 years of experience and with highly recognized expert accreditations. We recently added penetration testing to our list of services and would like to take this opportunity to explain to you how it works and how it can protect your business. As you are no doubt aware, the importance of IT security cannot be overestimated. Even the largest companies with the most rigorously tested IT systems are vulnerable to attacks from well-equipped hackers. A well-secured IT system will often combine automated testing and manual testing to maximize protection. This is why we wanted to have a dedicated webinar about the pen test solutions to ensure that you are fully prepared before you commit with any provider. Here is the agenda we'll go through during this webinar. Part 1, the basics of penetration testing. Part 2, testing procedures. Part 3, test reporting and remediation. Part 4, do I need a pen test? During the webinar, you can ask your questions by using the question or chat box. We'll answer them at the end of the webinar. Without further ado, let me hand you over to James, our pen test specialist, who will talk you through the finer points of penetration testing.
Thank you, Michel. So thank you all for joining us today for this webinar. What we want to try and achieve today is to explain in as non-technical terms as possible what actually a penetration test is, what a tester would do, how we would go about it, and the kind of outputs that you can expect from a penetration test. And really why people are starting to undertake them on a fairly regular basis. You know, the team that we have, the pen test team we have, has grown in size exponentially even over the last 12 months, so it is becoming something that people are becoming more and more aware of. So I just want to introduce you to the finer points of it. So, what is a penetration test? The important thing to remember about a penetration test is that when we undertake it, we do so in exactly the same way as any malicious hacker around the world would. In order for it to be successful and to give the right outputs, it needs to be done in exactly the same way. So all of our testers are trained to undertake just as a malicious hacker would. It is, you'll hear it often referred to as ethical hacking. Now, the reason that it is ethical as opposed to malicious is that it is very much controlled. A hacker that around the world may hack into your system, and if they don't find what they're looking for, they'll just bring the whole system down. The difference with ethical hacking is we do not cause damage to the infrastructure. We only prove concepts. So what we would do is we would look at a system and we would find out where there are vulnerabilities or open doors. That means any particular areas of that network that are weak and that could be exploited. We do not then go on to exploit the system. It is that stage that tends to bring a system down. So it is important to remember, and this is one of the great myths of penetration testing. People say, will it destroy my system? The answer is no. We can't be 100%, but we're 99.9%. And the reason we're that sure is because we don't exploit any vulnerabilities. Why would we undertake a penetration test? Well, the aims are ultimately to make your systems more secure so that you can be as confident as possible and your clients can be as confident as possible that they are dealing with a company who takes security, they regard it as important, and they are secure to external and internal attacks. Who carries out the pen testing? There are thousands of penetration testers across the world. The important thing to establish when you're choosing a company is the accreditation which those testers and that company have. The highest level of accreditation that one can achieve is what is called the check status. Check is a system that was established by GCHQ, and it requires any company or tester that wants to become a member to go through a very, very rigorous exercise and accreditation plan. The failure rate for the check status, achieving a check status, is 87%. So I'm sure you can appreciate that once you have it, it is a very good seal of approval. Currently, there are only 38 check companies in the UK and in the world, although it is a UK standard. If you want to do penetration testing for the UK government, for the MOD, for the NHS, then you are required to be a check company because it is that ultimate seal of approval. We are a check company, and all of our testers are check testers. The other qualifications you would look at are CREST, which is you can have various different types of training courses for particular types of penetration testing, whether that's web applications, social engineering. They provide training courses so that you can start to specialize in those areas. Again, we have a number of testers who are specialists in their own area. The final one is CBEST. CBEST is similar to check, but as opposed to being for the government, it is actually for financial institutions. So it's very much focused on banks, insurance companies, building societies, anyone from a financial position. We are currently going through the process of attaining that qualification. As I mentioned, these involve both practical and exam and are extremely onerous. The exam section can last for up to 48 hours continuously for a tester. In addition to that, our ISO 27001 or 9001 certified just go that extra way to show that how we manage information, how we control data, and the fact that we control it in a as secure manner as possible. Why would you have a penetration test? Well, obviously, financial and reputational impact. There are some fairly frightening figures out there. For example, you know, some years ago, this was back in 2011, it was the statistics showed that a small to medium enterprise that suffered a large data breach of some kind, 93% would be out of business within 12 months. That has been proven in some of the companies that we have dealt with that have suffered an attack. Due diligence, good practice. As part of an ISO 27001 or as part of a general security policy, having a penetration test is a very, very good way to establish where the business is in terms of its security posture. Accreditation and compliance. Some people will require you to have a penetration test. For example, some insurance companies now, if they are offering cyber insurance, they will want that company to have a penetration test so that they can establish that they are dealing with security in the right way. And obviously we have responsibilities to clients and to staff. We have come across a number of instances whereby hackers have been trying to attack a large client, and because that client is secure, what they've been doing is they've been trying to jump onto the client through third-party suppliers. So if you are supplying into a big organization, you must be secure because hackers can get to your clients through that. And obviously you have a responsibility to retain their data and your staff's data in a secure manner. How do I know if I've been hacked? This is a question that we get asked a lot. Well, the answer is you don't. While we've been on this webinar, which has been running, I suppose, for about 15 minutes, each of your IP addresses have had an unauthorized view probably about 5 times. An IP address is looked at by somebody around the world without your knowledge once every 3 minutes. A penetration test may identify if a hack has happened, and there may be some signs. But the reality is the reason we go about pen testing is not to fix a problem, it's to prevent it happening. Once a hack has occurred, while we may be able to find out where the origins were, it is unlikely, and it is very unlikely we'll be able to recover the data or indeed the reputational damage. So it's always worth, it's a prevention is better than cure is the approach we try and talk to our clients about, that the safety and the knowledge that you know that you are secure, and that is something, it's a marketing tool you can then pass on to your customers so they also know that you're secure. Some of you who have some knowledge of penetration testing will often have heard about the difference between an automated scan and a manual test. Both are very valid forms of penetration testing. The main differences is that with an automated test, you can just let it run, and that will scan a system automatically and it will look for vulnerabilities. It works at very great speed and it is a very cost-effective solution. We often suggest to people that in between their manual penetration tests that they run automated scans. It also gives you an idea of where your baseline of security is, and each scan you run after that, it will be measured against that baseline. The problem with automated tests, or actually not the problem, where you would need a manual test, is really to identify what those vulnerabilities are. What can people do with them? A manual test will tell you it's there, and then the automated test will tell you there's a vulnerability there. The manual test would then involve human interaction. We would then look at it manually and see what we can do with that vulnerability. And that really requires the tester expertise. So just to recap there, we would suggest a manual test and then an automated test in between your manual test, just to keep you secure throughout the year. So, what is tested? How do we test it? And how do we go about the methodology? There are lots of different types of penetration tests, but there are three that I would like to concentrate on today, which I think would be that they are the most useful. The first is the external penetration test, the other is the internal, and the final is the web application. External and internal, the analogy that I like to use is that of a house with a burglar trying to get in. When a burglar stands outside the house, he will look for vulnerabilities, weaknesses that he can get into the house. Is a door open? Is a window unlocked? Is there a skylight open? Those kind of things. It's exactly the same for an external hacker. That could be someone who's in the building next door or who is on the other side of the world. They effectively sit outside of the firewall. The internal penetration test will look at those potential attacks that come from within, whether it's a disgruntled member of staff, it's a contractor, anyone you invite into your business. So those first two tests would look at securing your business from the outside and then from the inside. Web application testing is much more about the way that your website is built, how it operates, can it be defaced, can people add code to it to make it perform in a certain way. So those are the three main tests that we really want to promote to you today. And if you undertook those three tests as a company, you could be pretty sure that you are as secure as you can be. There are other tests that we can also carry out, and I don't want to run through all of these, but that just gives you an idea. We are actually experts in mobile applications and devices. If you wanted us to look at how your servers were built, or if you've written a particular app or program, we could look at the code to make sure that it's secure. Social engineering, that's really, we would look at how security aware are your staff. Can we get into your building? You know, the staff are often the weakest link in any business, and we will also test those more physical sides of things. And that can also include CCTV, locks, doors, etc. So it's not just about, you know, IT. The scope of the penetration test, how does it work? Where do we start? Well, first of all, a lot of clients would come to us and say, well, we like to have a penetration, but we don't know where to start. Well, that's perfectly natural and perfectly normal, and we are we will help you decide the best form of penetration testing for you. And that would be done by an initial scoping meeting questionnaire where we would jump on a conference call, or we could do it face-to-face, and we just want to understand a bit about your business. What are your concerns? Have you had any specific threats? And by that conversation, it will become apparent of the kind of testing you need, and we would suggest that to you. We would then also include, once we've established that, we would then assign a trained specialist, one of our penetration testers. And what we would need from you is a dedicated point of contact. The point of contact at the client side is a very important person for us, and they must be available to us at all times. And that's for a number of reasons. If we found a particularly critical vulnerability, we need to be able to inform someone straight away. By critical vulnerability, we see that as something that could imminently bring a system down. We would automatically stop testing, and we would let the point of contact know. And we would have that one point of contact throughout the whole process. Everything is agreed beforehand. This is another important one. People get concerned that once a test starts, then we could just be let loose to run around your system. It doesn't work like that. We agree everything beforehand. It is all signed off, and once that scope of work is agreed, we cannot move outside of it. So it is much more controlled. So we start with our scope of work. We discuss the testing strategy with you. The methodologies we use, which we're going to talk about a little more later, but they are all based on the CSG check standards, which are the highest standards of penetration testing. We're going to show you some sample reports to see the output you get, because after all, the whole point of investing in this is to see the information that you get out of it and that it's worthwhile. As I mentioned before, testing is non-invasive, which means we prove concept. We find a vulnerability, and we show that it's there, but we do not exploit it. It is the exploitation that brings systems down. We just show you that there's a door that's open. And that is all done by, as I talked about, agreed scope of work. So a document that says this is what we are going to do step by step. We do not do denial of service attacks. Lots of companies don't anymore. There's really no need. The testing methodology we would establish with you: black box, grey box, white box. We're going to talk a bit more about this in a moment. One of the things that we would do before we even start testing is we would do what we call an open source public discovery exercise. So our testers will go across the internet, and anything that's publicly available we would look at to see if there was anything about your company, anything in chat rooms, anything on blogs, anything that we feel could be give someone reason to launch an attack on you. Is someone saying bad things about the company? What's the feeling about the company? That gives us an idea of where your standing is within the wider marketplace. Testing then starts. Testing would generally start with some automated scanning, which would highlight vulnerabilities. Those vulnerabilities would then be exploited manually in full by the penetration tester. So they just prove that actually there is a vulnerability there, and this is what I can do with it. Once we finished that, we would then give an overall rating of the test, whether it's your external infrastructure, your internal infrastructure, or your website. We would rate it in a number of different ways. The worst would be critical, then high, medium, and low. We give an overall rating for the site, and then we give individual ratings for each of the vulnerabilities found. Once we finish, this is a very important part of what we do, we clean up. So we ensure that anything that we have done while we've been testing is cleaned up and left just as your system was when we started, and that most importantly we haven't left any what we call back doors open. Sometimes this process can do that, and that gives automatically access to a hacker. So clearly we need to make sure that we have done everything, we've removed everything that we've done when we finish, so you can be happy that your system is as it was when we started. just going back to black box, white box and grey box testing. Basically, this is determined really about the appetite of the client. What outputs are they looking for? Are they looking to see if a competitor can steal information from them? Are they worried about a particular member of staff? Are they looking at an old member of staff? And those kind of things determine the type of testing you want. For example, black box testing. You tell us absolutely nothing. All you give us is the name of the company, and then we go about seeing whether or not we can breach your systems. Because clearly we have to appreciate that if there is a hacker on the other side of the world, they won't have any information about you necessarily. So we have to make that as real life as possible. White box, as I mentioned, is if you have a member of staff you're concerned about, they would already have access to the network. So there was no point in us trying to breach the network. What we want to see is the segregation right? Is the payroll department correctly segregated from everyone else? Can I get on to the system and escalate my privileges to administrator level? Can I change things I shouldn't? So that is very much a more targeted approach. And grey box is a mixture of the two. A lot of the testing we do would probably be grey box, whereby initially we would try and crack usernames and passwords, and then after that a client would supply us with some low-level user credentials, and we would attempt to escalate our privileges. So, before we start a test, what do we do? The first stage is passive reconnaissance. We have a look at the network we're dealing with. How's it made up? What does it do? What's the functionality of it? What's the functionality of it? Once we know those things, we can then start to fingerprint it. That means we start to put together an exact picture of what this system is, and the more accurate we can do that, the more successful the testing will be. Because we've got an exact picture of what we're dealing with here, and then we can know how we can manipulate that. That's the vulnerability discovery stage. Then, once we've identified the vulnerabilities, we then go on to the exploitation, the verification. Now, I know I said earlier that we don't exploit. This is exploitation just to prove it's a genuine vulnerability, i.e. we verify it's a vulnerability. We do not go further into the system. We can do that, it is possible, but that would only be with express written permission from the client. It is not done as a matter of course. And as I mentioned, finally, we clean up before we leave. So, we've done all of the testing. You are obviously keen to find out what we found, how we rated it, and what we can do about it. We supply a very comprehensive report of our findings, but we have to be aware that this report needs to be absorbed by lots of different people. The chairman of the company, he may have no technical experience whatsoever, but the IT guys who are going to need to fix it, they need that technical information. So we break up the report into three very distinct sections. The management summary. This is ideally for the board, senior management, who want to get an idea of the security posture of the business. So that will give a summary of key findings, the risk ratings that we found in vulnerabilities, the remediation time that we think it will take, and what we think the impact on the business will be. The technical overview will then give a summary of the more technical aspects of the vulnerabilities we found, how we found them, what we did, because the important thing to remember is any vulnerability we found, we have to prove that we can do it again. So we have to show how we did it and detail how we did it so that anyone else could follow that process and that we can show that it was a genuine vulnerability. And then finally, with every test we do, and every vulnerability we find, we offer a remediation for it. We tell you how to fix it. But this is a very important point. We cannot fix it ourselves. The reason we can't fix it ourselves is because that gives us an understanding of the infrastructure of your system that would not allow us to be objective in the future. So if we came to test again, we would know how your system worked because we'd fixed it. We can't do that because the test wouldn't be as realistic as it could be. However, we do show you how to fix it, and we remain on hand to offer any advice through that process. Here are a couple of things that I just wanted to highlight about the kind of vulnerabilities that you could expect us to find. Now, these are by no means exhaustive, but there are some of the most regular ones. So we'll have a look. Password policy was found to be inadequate. If we tell you that a 4-digit password we would crack in about 30 seconds, 6 characters in about 2 hours, 8 characters upper and lower case with symbols could take up to 64 years. So we would advise you on how your password policy is. You know, if people still got passworded, we would find things like that fairly quickly. We would also ensure that any software you have is all patched and up to date, because a lot of software will have known vulnerabilities in it, which is why a patch is issued. So if you're up to date with the patches, there shouldn't be any vulnerabilities in software. Ports that are left open, so there might have been an application running on a port that's no longer there, but the port wasn't closed. The last two are quite interesting ones, and they are really about websites. It's something we come across quite regularly. For example, if you have a website that has a login function, so that you can basically, you type in a username and password. If those fields aren't what we call sanitized, it means that we can type in code into those fields, and we can make the website behave in any way we like. We can generally clone someone's website in about 10 minutes. So what will happen is your clients will go onto it, they'll click somewhere, a link on the website, and they'll go to a page that actually looks exactly like your website, but we've manipulated them to take them to a site that we want. From there, we can capture usernames, passwords, credit card details. Now, when we say sanitized, it means that that field must only accept numbers or letters and nothing else. Now, passwords of the people who are legitimately logging in, they can be whitelisted, so they can include symbols. But generally, someone who's just coming to the site, it must be that those fields will only accept letters and numbers, because that is the way people can very quickly take control of a system. It's something that we find fairly regularly. So, you know, for all of you, it's always probably worth going back to your IT teams and asking them if those fields, those login fields, are what we call sanitized. This is getting into the more kind of technical summary. So once we've identified, you'll see from this table, we found 29 vulnerabilities. We'll then break that down into where the vulnerability was, how we rated it, i.e. critical, high, medium, or low. And then we'll also show you how hard or difficult or easy we think it will to fix. So for example, if you have a look at this page here, low effort 28, moderate effort 1. And you'll see there what we think in terms of man days it will take you to fix. That is a very good way to help the senior management provide a budget in order to remediate these things. Generally, it is, you won't find it taking days and days and days. A lot of the stuff we find, it can generally be remediated in a couple of days. So we then go on to a more technical information. So let's say that's an example of an SQL injection that we found. We will then rate it in 4 ways, i.e. what is the impact to the business for that particular injection? We think it's high. What is the risk? It's high. What is the likelihood? High, fixed effort, medium. The reason we do that is because quite often you'll come across a vulnerability where the impact is high and the risk is high, but the likelihood of it actually happening is very low. That again allows management to decide, well, how much resource do I want to apply for this? You know, there are so many different things that would need to happen in order for that actual vulnerability to be exploited. It sometimes isn't worth the remediation. So we hope you understand that. And then finally, the detailed technical remediation. This would be for your IT department. So we would give them much more information about the vulnerability and how to remediate it. And as I mentioned, our team remains on hand to talk them through it. If there's something that they don't understand, we will happily talk them through it until they are happy that they have fixed any issues. Finally, the report will go through an internal technical and grammatical QA. The technical QA means that another tester will review the work of the tester that carried out your penetration test, just to make sure that they agree with all the things they found. Sometimes it doesn't happen. They'll then discuss it. So it's not just one person's opinion. It is verified by a second person. And then just to make sure that it is everything's correctly spelled, the grammar is correct, it will also go through a separate grammar QA. The report is then sent to the client, to yourselves. We do this in a particularly secure way. The first thing we would do is we would send a password by text message to the mobile phone of the point of contact. Only then, once we've received confirmation that the point of contact has received that password, we will then send a URL link by email. So those two different parts will go by two different mediums so that they're not intercepted in any way and it remains as secure as possible. The report would generally be delivered within 2 to 3 days following the end of testing. It really depends how long the report takes to do. Generally, the rule of thumb is it's half the testing time. So if it took 2 days to test, it'll take 1 day to report. So that's 3 days. And then within 2 to 3 days following that, you'll have your report delivered securely to you. So it is not a long, drawn-out process. We try to get the information to you as quickly as possible. So I think that's all from me. I'm going to pass you back to Michel, who's going to finish off.
Thank you very much, James, for that thorough introduction to pen testing, procedures, and test reporting and remediation. If anyone has any questions, don't hesitate to submit on the questionnaire and the chat box. Now I will talk whether your organization needs a pen test. Every business, it matters, doesn't matter if it's big or small, gains from a pen test. A pen test should be tailored to the requirements of your business. It's a common mistake that companies think that only big businesses get targeted by hackers, but also smaller companies require a pen test to make sure everything will be as safe as possible and they won't be targeted by hackers. If your organization has a quality accreditation such as ISO 27001, regular testing is recommended to order to retain accreditation. And also, some industries handle sensitive data and regulators to require pen test in those cases. It's good to have different kinds of pen test organizations to make sure that the company that does the pen test training doesn't know the infrastructure already. So it's different to have. It's good to have different kinds of companies to check your organization. Here are a list of questions you should ask yourself before committing. What's the goal of the penetration test for me? What do I do if I want to have a test? And what's the scope of the test? And what do you need to agree on? How frequently do you want to run a penetration testing? And when was the last time you had a penetration testing? So here are the recommendations. Outsource the service for better quality and impartiality. Choose a supplier with respected accreditations and web security experience. Make sure you are agreed on the scope test and get a signed agreement. Make sure you have a dedicated expert during the penetration test. Get a sample of the penetration test before you commit. After the penetration test, plan a training session for your employees. Thank you very much, James. And many thanks for you all for attending the webinar. We hope it has been informative overview and it will be made clear just what a pen test is, how it works, and how it should be useful for your business. If you would like to know more for a free consultation, please get in touch via email or phone. There's also a possibility to talk with your dedicated account manager or access us through support@ssl.co.uk or your other country. We at SSL 247 are also specialists in SSL certificates with platinum partnerships with the biggest certificate authorities, digital IDs, anti-malware solutions, domain names, and online brand protection. Feel free to get in touch with our expert consultants for any needs. These presentations and record will be available very soon, and we'll keep you posted. That's about it for today, and I would like to thank James for the presentation and all the attendees.